Picture this. You're sitting at your desk, just casually scrolling through your morning emails, sipping your coffee, when your manager walks up and drops a massive opportunity right in your lap. They want you to give the quarterly update presentation to the entire senior management team. Immediately, your heart skips a beat. Your stomach ties itself into this incredibly tight knot, your palms get all clammy, and suddenly you literally forget how to breathe normally. It doesn't feel like a great career move. It feels like an impending disaster. So in that exact moment of rising panic, your brain goes into full-on survival mode, and you start frantically scanning for an escape hatch. You actually think about asking your manager if someone else, maybe that senior colleague who actually enjoys the sound of their own voice, can just take the spotlight instead. You try to convince yourself that you just need more time, a bit more experience, or maybe a much fancier job title before you could possibly stand in front of the executive team. The urge to just turn around and run in the opposite direction is totally overpowering. And there it is, the exact internal monologue that traps so many of us. I'm not confident enough yet. You tell yourself that once you finally feel completely secure and perfectly polished and totally fearless, well, then you'll gladly step up to the plate. But because you don't feel that way right now, you just avoid the challenge entirely. Listen, it's a completely natural human reaction. Our brains are literally hardwired to protect us from uncomfortable feelings like anxiety and vulnerability at all costs. It's an ancient survival mechanism. But here's the kicker. By seeking that comfort, we actually get the whole mechanism of confidence completely backwards. I really want you to let this question sink in for a second. What if waiting until you feel confident is exactly what prevents you from becoming confident? We tend to think that our feelings have to dictate our actions, right? Like we have to feel brave before we can act bravely. We assume confidence is just this magical trait you either wake up with or you don't. But psychology shows us something super fascinating. Attitudes actually follow behavior. You don't gain confidence just because someone tells you you can do it or because you stand in front of a mirror reciting daily affirmations. Your brain needs undeniable proof. So confidence isn't a prerequisite for action. Confidence is the actual result of taking action. Okay, so let's dive into this. How do we actually create that hard proof for our brains? Well, it starts with our very first practical action. You have to act before you feel completely ready. You build confidence indirectly, simply by doing the thing you're actively avoiding. It's what we call the confidence-competence loop. You take a really small action, you build a tiny bit of confidence, and that gives you the solid proof you need to feel just a little more confident, which then fuels your next action. You literally cannot wait for the magic feeling to arrive before you start. You have to lead with action. Just think about it. If you wait for this magical feeling of readiness to just wash over you, you stay stuck. It's a paralyzing trap. No experience means you never get the confidence. But let's look at the reality of building from actual experience. If that senior management presentation feels way too overwhelming to tackle completely solo, you don't just dodge it entirely. Instead, you volunteer to present just a small 5-minute chunk of it. You take a manageable piece of the pie. And by doing that, your brain starts to realize, hey, I survived that. The room didn't catch on fire. I can actually do this. And that heavy cloud of self-doubt, it naturally begins to fade. Which transitions us perfectly to action 2. Start with smaller challenges. When you're learning a new skill, especially a high-pressure soft skill like public speaking, pitching a bold idea, or even just leading a meeting, you really shouldn't just throw yourself straight to the wolves. Jumping into the deep end can actually backfire spectacularly. It spikes your anxiety so high that you completely freeze up, and you impair your ability to learn anything from the experience. Instead, you've got to increase the difficulty progressively. You're looking for that sweet spot just outside your comfort zone, challenging enough to make you stretch and grow, but definitely not so terrifying that you just shut down. So think of this progression like walking up a staircase. You wouldn't try to leap from the ground floor straight up to the executive boardroom in a single bound, right? It's impossible. Your first step might just be speaking up in your weekly team update. It's a safe, familiar group of peers who already know you. Once you've practiced there and built some foundational competence, you step up to step 2, a slightly longer presentation for your wider department. Then step 3, maybe speaking directly to a key customer. And finally, step 4, you are truly ready for that high-stakes executive presentation. Every single step gives you the hard-earned, undeniable proof your brain needs to build genuine confidence. You just take the massively overwhelming goal and break it down into manageable stairs. Now, stepping up those stairs is still going to bring on a wave of anxiety. Which brings us to action 3, prepare for what you fear. In high-stakes situations, a lack of actual preparation is shockingly common. People so often try to just improvise, secretly hoping that pure inspiration and eloquence will magically strike them the second they step up to the podium. But let's be totally honest, winging it is a terrible, terrible strategy if your hands are already shaking and your mind is going blank. Preparing well is the absolute key to raising your confidence baseline. And I don't just mean memorizing your slides word for word. I mean actively anticipating the exact scenarios that are making you so incredibly anxious in the first place. Literally sit down and write out the 5 toughest, most brutal questions senior management might throw at you. What are their most likely objections? Where are the glaring holes in your data? Think them through really carefully beforehand and write out your exact answers. Please do not naively assume you won't get pushback, because you absolutely will. By physically writing down the answers to your absolute worst-case scenarios, you create this incredibly calming effect in your mind. You diffuse the anxiety because you now know exactly how you will handle the most difficult moments. The terrifying unknown suddenly becomes the prepared. All right, so once you have your material dialed in and your disaster recovery plan in place, you move to action 4, rehearse. And I definitely do not mean looking over your notes while sitting silently on your comfortable couch, nodding along to your own brilliant thoughts. That's not rehearsing, guys. That's just reading. Active rehearsal is a completely different ballgame, and it's where your real armor is forged for the actual event. Because here's the thing, when you just review things in your head, everything sounds perfectly coherent. You sound like an absolute genius in your own mind. But when you finally speak those words out loud, you suddenly realize where your timing is totally off, where you stumble on your phrasing, or where your core arguments just fall completely flat. To really supercharge your confidence, enlist a trusted colleague to role-play the scenario with you. Have them play the role of the highly skeptical executive. Tell them to interrupt you. Have them fire off those 5 tough questions you prepared for earlier. Testing your readiness in a simulated out-loud environment proves to your nervous brain that you can easily handle the real thing. Finally, we reach action 5. Accept imperfection and keep going. And let me just offer a massive sigh of relief for anyone who struggles with confidence. Nobody is expecting perfection. Truly. In fact, your audience actually wants you to succeed. Nobody sits in a presentation secretly hoping it's going to be super awkward and terrible. Confidence absolutely does not require a flawless performance. Mistakes are simply stepping stones to success. If you make a mistake, if you stammer slightly, or if you completely blank and forget a minor point during that big presentation, do not catastrophize and tell yourself the whole thing is a total disaster. Because this whole journey of growth isn't a one-and-done event. It's a continuous, dynamic loop. You take action, which is step 1. Because you acted, even if it was wildly imperfect, you gain real-world experience in step 2. That lived experience builds your confidence in step 3, and that hard-earned confidence solidifies into unshakable confidence in step 4. But it doesn't stop there. That new baseline of confidence naturally pushes you to step 5, taking a bigger action next time. If you mess up in the middle of a presentation, you just adopt a sports mentality. Focus on the next play. You don't obsess over the stumble. You put all your mental energy into delivering your next point with absolute conviction. Overcoming that mistake in real time is exactly what fuels the loop and proves your resilience. So this brings us right back to how our opening story concludes. We're back at the presentation. The employee is finally standing right there, front and center, looking at the senior management team. And guess what? They are still nervous. Their heart might still be beating a little too fast, and their palms might still be sweating. But they present anyway. They step up. They have accepted that uncomfortable feelings are just a natural, totally unavoidable part of moving beyond their comfort zone. They aren't waiting for the fear to vanish entirely, because they know that stepping into the arena and doing the actual work is the absolute only way the fear will eventually shrink. True courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing action over those limiting feelings. Which leaves us with this final thought. What are you waiting to feel confident about that you could start practicing today? Stop waiting for that elusive, magical feeling of perfect readiness. Honestly, it's never going to come while you're standing still. Find your smallest possible next step. Prepare for it diligently, accept that it won't be perfect, and take action. Because ultimately, that is the only way you build true, lasting confidence.